Hi, everybody, and welcome back to another edition of the Beyond the Cage podcast presented by Fight Chicks. I am your host, Jim Graham. Alongside me is my co-host, the Juice, Dave Sadler. On this week's episode, we're going to go over some of the top headlines in the world of mixed martial arts. We will also preview Bellator 136, and also there's World Series of Fighting 20 this week as well. And for the first time ever, the UFC will make a trip to Poland for UFC Fight Night 64 Crow Cop versus Gonzaga 2, streaming live on the UFC Fight Pass this Saturday. As I said, I am Jim Graham, your host. He is the Juice. And how's it going, Dave?
Good. Just got back from the gym, crushing it there. And I'm about ready to crush this podcast. How about you?
Very excited for the podcast today. A lot of stuff to talk about, a lot of fights coming up. And, of course, as you can see in the background for today's show, I have the Polish flag. For those of you wondering, yes, I am of Polish descent. In fact, 75% Polish descent, so I am pretty excited. And no, I did not just buy this just to put in the background of the show. I've had this for several years, just in case anyone was wondering.
Hopefully you didn't take it out of our budget.
No, it is not out of the Beyond the Cage budget. Actually, believe it or not, I did get this for free. A friend of mine gave it to me. But anyways, still I had it. I wanted to bust it out for this week's show. Now, of course, there's a little variation on the Polish flag. The Polish flag is typically just the red and white, but they threw in the eagle there and the Polska, so it's pretty cool. Nice. So maybe one day I'll get it signed by Joanna Jezherek. Maybe one day. Maybe not. I don't know. That's a weird item to send in. You never know. That's gonna bleed through the. I don't know. Yeah. I'll have to ask AJ if he has any. AJ Hiller, a friend at MMA Signatures, if he has any signed flags, and ask how that goes.
Yeah.
He would be the expert on that.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know how that would work. It would be cool.
The only thing would suck is if it was signed like really small and someone's like, "What's that black smudge on your flag? Are you gonna get that out?" And I'm like, "No, that's signed." And they're like, "What?" Then they gotta look up real close, like, "Oh, okay." That'd be the only disappointing one. So that's kind of big. Anyways, getting off track here. It's a cool flag, so pay attention. All right, let's start first with probably the most upsetting headline this weekend, Dave, or it happened this past weekend into this week, and that is the fact that one Mr. Quentin Rampage Jackson will be off. That's right, will be off UFC 186. He's not happy about it, Dave. He is not. I mean, he is screaming mad that he is not going to be in UFC 186. So,
hey, Anderson Silva's not thrilled about it either. See?
No, he is not. He is off the Ultimate Fighter Brazil, and though if you watch the promos and some of the pictures, they still show him in all the promos. Like, they haven't got the hint, like, he's not in it. I don't...
Yeah.
Anyways, Rampage Jackson, not at Bellator anymore, of course, was going to fight with the UFC once again, and Bellator is the organization that is stopping Quentin Rampage Jackson from fighting at UFC 186, and a New Jersey court granted a injunction that will stop Bellator or from UFC having the former Bellator fighter now Quentin Rampage Jackson fight on the April 25th card in Montreal. And this is from an article on SheerDog.com, originally reported by Tristan Critchfield. It also mentions some stuff from Ariel Helwani. The UFC has been advised of the New Jersey State Court's ruling in the matter between Quentin Rampage Jackson and Bellator MMA. The UFC organization was surprised about the ruling because Mr. Jackson represented to the UFC on multiple occasions that he was free to negotiate and contract with the UFC, the statement read. The UFC organization is also surprised that Bellator sat on its alleged right for months before taking action. Continue on saying, this is from a UFC press statement, the UFC understands that Mr. Rampage Jackson is considering an emergency appeal, and the UFC is also considering action to protect its rights and minimize damages regarding this matter. Lastly, the UFC 186 in Montreal will proceed as planned, and the UFC is currently evaluating its fight card options. As of right now, Dave, Demetrius Mighty Mouse Johnson against Kaiji Horiguchi will be the main event, and the co-main event will now most likely be Michael Bisping against CB Dalloway. The card was also supposed to feature, obviously, Rampage Jackson against Fabio Maldonado, and a bantamweight title fight, which was the original main event, between TJ Dillashaw and Renan Barão. So it looks as though UFC 186 kind of plagued here, Dave. And when we've talked about this issue several times, it's for Bellator, not the fact that I think it's more the fact that they want to maybe slow Rampage's way back to the UFC more so than it is truly them thinking they can get Rampage Jackson back. I think Rampage has made up his mind he does not want to fight for Bellator no matter how this happens, and he will just continue to sit and wait and maybe even retire probably rather than fight for Bellator again. That's kind of the vibe I'm getting. So Bellator doing this, and as the UFC said, surprised that all of a sudden they're now taking this action after months of sitting on possible, legal action where they obviously did get an injunction, that why just now has this taken place, kind of all raises a lot of different questions. And again, I don't really think it does a lot for Bellator. Sure, does it kind of hurt the UFC a little bit with 186? Sure, but you can make a case UFC 186 was kind of already hurt with Dillashaw getting hurt and having to leave the card. So I don't think it super damages the card. Damage is already done, but I just think it's rather unfortunate. And honestly, I think it's kind of a dick move by Bellator, to be quite honest.
Yeah, it's we're fighting over Rampage Jackson here. Big name. Gets people to watch. But it's not like we're like a high level talent here. He's on the back end of his career, and like you said, it is pretty much a dick move by Bellator. You kind of thought with Scott Coker being in charge, considering he was paid by Zuffa, after they took over Strikeforce, that maybe this doesn't come down. Maybe it's not even a move that Scott Coker wants to make. Maybe it's his bosses that are doing it. But a couple of things that I saw online after all that stuff was posted, the UFC has their 186 fight card on their page. Rampage and Maldonado still on there, and the Bell Center in Montreal, Quebec, Canada. They are offering refunds up until, I believe it says, April the 10th, which is kind of weird. The UFC still has it on their page, but you can get a refund for a fight that technically isn't canceled yet, which I thought was a little bit weird.
I think even if Rampage Jackson can't fight on the card, I don't think they cancel the event. I really don't. I mean, regardless of how they think Demetrius Mighty Mouse Johnson does on pay-per-view and how his performance record is done, I don't think you cancel that event. If anything, maybe you move it from a pay-per-view to a Fox card or something like that, or Fox Sports, however you want to do it. Maybe you don't have it on pay-per-view, but I don't think you cancel the card. I feel like that's not the best option.
Yeah.
You have a title fight. You have something tangible there. Now, if Mighty Mouse got hurt, then yeah, I'd cancel the card. But the way it is right now, I would not cancel the card. Has it suffered some setbacks? Yeah, but I don't think that makes the card. That means you have to cancel everything else that is in there, especially we're a little less than 3 weeks to the event.
Yeah, we went over this before, that the pay-per-view providers. I think our friend Ray Flores mentioned it. Pay-per-view providers aren't real happy if they've been putting out promos for a while and then you take it off of pay-per-view and put it onto a free platform. So I don't think that would be canceling it. I think would be the best option if Mighty Mouse were to fall off. But there's a lot of good fights on 186 that that aren't really being talked about. Like Jessica Rakoczy from The Ultimate Fighter, she's coming back. There's Alexis Davis, Sarah Kaufman. Put that on the main card.
That probably will end up being on the main card, I would imagine.
Yeah. Well, currently they have Patrick Cote and Joe Riggs as the main event of the Fox Sports 1 prelim. So, but it'll yeah, it's interesting, and like you said, think it's kind of a D move by Bellator.
Well, Rampage Jackson, in response to this injunction, took to social media and specifically his Instagram page, and this is the picture. Actually, I can show you the picture here.
Uh-oh.
We have the fancy screen share here. So let's show it to you, folks, here. All right, how do you like that? That's the picture that Rampage Jackson posted. There are more Rampage fans than Bellator Rampage fans, with Kermit the Frog there drinking the Lipton tea. And also in the article, he went on to say, like, Bellator, went to a small town court where they knew the judge, and he would definitely for sure give him the injunction, and that's basically BS and stuff like that. He's like, smart move, Bellator, and so he was not happy with it, as one would think, and he didn't say anything too derogatory. I think he spoke his mind. He has a right to be mad, as it will go back to me here, and I don't know. I think it's kind of funny, and as we mentioned in the other article there on Sheerdog, he is seeking to get an emergency appeal, and I think that he has a chance to stay the injunction until after the fight. I mean, the fact that Bellator was able to get one this quickly and get him to not fight, I honestly think there may be a chance that he could get it stayed, and the fight may still be on.
Yeah, I'm not a legal expert by any stretch of the imagination, but I just don't understand why Bellator does the injunction. Why they file for it, so that he doesn't fight. It doesn't help them any. It just makes them look ridiculous in my mind.
All right, well, let's stick here with the UFC. Some other news coming up about potential fights. Big Nog, Antonio Rodrigo Nogueira, will once again step into the octagon, and what we'll talk about this in a second. Hopefully is his last fight, as he will take on Stefan Struve at UFC 190, which of course is Ronda Rousey against Bethe Correia, August 1st down in Rio. And his last couple efforts have not been good, Dave. And win or lose against Stefan Struve, I think this should be the end for Big Nog, and I think maybe he was waiting to do it in his home country to say goodbye to the fans and whatnot, but this has to be the last fight for Big Nog. I mean, he's had a great career, should be in the UFC Hall of Fame when he's all said and done, and has already been a great coach and probably will continue to be a great coach for years to come. But in terms of fighting in the ring anymore, he's just been in so many wars, Dave. He just can't take the hits like he used to.
That's a perfect response. You know what? In all honesty, neither one of these two guys should be fighting. With the heart ailment that Stefan Struve had, my wife's got heart issues, and you don't really recover from those. And I'm sure they're both real, Struve's a great guy, I'm sure. But kind of would be nice to have a swan song for both of these guys, I guess. I don't want to see anything happen to Struve inside the octagon, and this is a perfect scenario for Big Nog to go out.
All right, speaking of comebacks, or trying to make a comeback, Mike Swick, once again, after suffering 2 years' worth of injury for the second time in his career, will now compete at UFC 189. He is scheduled to face Alex Garcia at welterweight, and that will be on July 11th. Mike Swick is now 35 years old, has not fought since UFC on Fox 5 when he lost to Matt Brown, getting knocked out. So, I don't know. I guess this is great for Mike Swick to try to make one more run here, but he was a guy that was very promising when he originally dropped down to welterweight, but he's basically lost 4 years in his prime, Dave, due to injury, and he's going to be one of those guys, I think, maybe more so than anybody else in the UFC, when you kind of look back and go, man, if he didn't get injured, I wonder if he could have been champ. I really think he had the skills and the potential to fight at a championship level had it not been for injury, and that's kind of what you can, if you look at baseball, maybe not quite to the same degree, because I don't know if Mike Swick's a UFC Hall of Famer, but throwing up somebody there like a a Ken Griffey Jr., a guy that had so many years due to injury. It's like, well, he already hit 600 home runs. How many would he hit? Had Nettie down all the injuries, or you can make the case for like Dante Culpepper in the NFL. The guy had a pretty good run there with the Vikings, and completely blew out his leg, and was never the same again. If that doesn't happen, what is his career like? Is he a Hall of Famer? So, I think for the UFC, where they haven't had too much of that, guys who's spending a really long time in injury, but Mike Swick's probably the biggest name that have spent that much time on the shelf, and he's always going to be one of those guys. No matter how many more fights he has, that you kind of will look back and go, man, geez, man, that's such a shame it happened to such a nice guy.
Yeah, it's the injury bug is a fickle thing. Taking time off like that, everybody improves from fight to fight, and when you've been injured for that long, I mean, I don't know how much time is recovery, how much time he's been in camp. It's just it's a fickle thing, and it's unfortunate when it happens, to talented guys like that, because not only us, but he probably wonders, what could have been. So, it's unfortunate, but part of the game, I guess, right?
Yeah, and it will be good to see him back. He was always an exciting fighter, so it will be good to see him back, and looking forward to his once again his re-return to the octagon here for UFC 189.
His re-debut.
Yeah, his debut, and it's not because he got cut. He's probably the only one. If you look at like stints in the UFC, you think, oh, this is like his third stint in the UFC. Yeah, it is, but he didn't get cut by the UFC in that standpoint. He's probably the only guy. All right, well, let's get to this weekend here. Let's start first with the 10th of April, as not one but two MMA fights will take place, as World Series of Fighting will hold their 20th event, and I guess the continuation of their four-man light heavyweight tournament, as their current middleweight champion, David Branch, will take on former UFC fighter Hani Marks. Also, Nick Newell will be fighting Joe Condon on the card. And probably the most interesting, Dave, and I believe it should show on the main card, is the man known as Ben Fodor, as he takes on Emmanuel Wallo. And if you don't know about Ben Fodor, he's 26 years old. He's 5-0 in his career, fighting out of Seattle, Washington. He does have a draw on his record. But he, for a while, Dave, not only while training martial arts, was a guy that tried to be a superhero, as he went by the name of Phoenix Jones and patrolled the streets of Seattle, Washington. And if you actually go to SheerDog.com to look up Mr. Ben Fodor, his profile picture on SheerDog is him in his Phoenix Jones costume, not him in MMA gloves or anything. So that should be exciting to see. I don't. He may kind of steal the spotlight away from Branch and Marks a little bit, Mr. Ben Fodor, but as people know, I read a lot of comic books. I've showed some of my toys and comic books here on the show, and I mention them every once in a while. But I gotta admit, it's pretty interesting to see a guy that actually, I don't know how successful he was. I mean, obviously he didn't die, so I guess you could mark that as being successful, right? I mean, that he didn't suffer any serious injury, and trying his trade in the MMA, and so far he's been pretty successful now in a big stage here like World Series of Fighting. I find it all interesting because when you look at comic books, a lot of these guys are, elite level athletes, or they're very skilled in hand-to-hand combat. And, with some of these guys in MMA, also very skilled in hand-to-hand combat, it kind of makes you wonder, like, these would be guys that would be superheroes. These are guys that, you read on the page, those type of skill set. And this guy actually did it. We don't have footage, and there's not like a chronicling history of 50 years of his character, but I think it's pretty interesting. This guy gave it a go, and he's gonna try his professional, his show his identity to the world here, so to speak. And I don't know, I find it pretty intriguing.
Yeah, it's one of the few things that's intriguing about the card. There's not a whole lot. It's a card that, definitely going to DVR it. I'll watch it. I don't think I'll be able to watch it live due to work and whatnot. But you know, there just hasn't been a whole lot of buzz around anything World Series of Fighting related. So, the superhero thing is good. It's got a little bit of buzz, but there's really only like 3 or 4 names that I've heard of before. Matt Secor is on the card. He was on Tough a long time ago,
Mm-hmm.
and he was on the same season as the Let Me Bang Bro guy.
Oh, yeah.
Let me bang, man.
Right.
Nick Newell's always an exciting guy, and then the main event should be pretty good. But it. I'm not gonna not watch it because it's fights, and I love watching the fights. So, but it's just, there's nothing that really reaches out and grabs you aside from a superhero inside the cage. What's the over/under that he wears a cape to the ring?
I don't know, but I feel like, I would.
Yeah.
I would be I'd be surprised if he doesn't wear something, at least his mask. He's gonna be something related to his costume. I feel like he has to.
I feel like I want to watch him pull up to the arena. Like, you know how when Bellator does it, they hop out of the Bellator van?
Do you think he has his Phoenix Jones mobile?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Like who sponsors a superhero? Like Condom Depot, they don't sponsor superheroes, right?
Well, I don't know. I don't think so. I mean, I don't
you know.
know.
I mean,
we got to get DC Comics and Marvel Comics on the phone here, I guess, huh?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like,
Wouldn't it be crazy if on his shorts he has the Avengers coming in theaters May 1st?
Yeah.
Yep. Real quickly, on World Series of Fighting 20, as I mentioned, David Branch, their middleweight champion, is fighting in their light heavyweight tournament. Do you like this? Do you like the fact that World Series of Fighting is allowing him to kind of move up and possibly be a division champion in 2 different weight classes? Do you like that, or do you think it's kind of a gimmick thing because Bellator couldn't find 4 decent light heavyweights? Or World Series of Fighting couldn't find 4 decent light heavyweights. Let me rephrase that.
Yeah. I think it's they couldn't find the proper number of people, qualified folks for a tournament, and winning a belt in 2 different divisions in Bellator or in World Series of Fighting isn't anywhere close to the prestige that it would have in the UFC, in my mind.
Well, no doubt. But if he's able to do this, you got to believe that if the UFC, he obviously did fight for the UFC at one point. Obviously, both these guys did, Branch and Marks. But if he is able to pull this off, Dave, and you look at what he's done since leaving the UFC, and now adds 2 titles to his resume, he's a very attracting guy for the UFC to reacquire. I would have to imagine, right? I mean, what more, you know what I mean? Like, and especially if he's able to, win in knockout fashion again, like he did win the middleweight title when he knocked out Yushin Okami. That adds a lot of prestige for the UFC going, all right, we got to get this guy back.
Yeah. How about that for it backfires on the World Series of Fighting? This guy's a champ in 2 different divisions, and then he bounces and heads to the UFC. Now you have 2 belts that are wide open.
Right. Well, that's the risk I guess they're taking, though.
Yeah.
And obviously, David Branch is taking a risk too, because let's say even though he's up a weight class, but if he gets knocked out by Hani Marks in the first round, that really delays his chance back to the UFC, because they go, even though if it was above a weight class, they go, man, if he's getting knocked out by this, I don't care if he's middleweight champ. That doesn't look good.
No. Yeah. Absolutely right.
It's a risk. All right, well, let's get to the other action on Friday night. Bellator 136. That will take place over in Irvine, California. Honestly, Dave, this is a really good card for Bellator. Just not even just the main card. Overall, I think this is just a better card. I mean, you got Saeed Awad is taking on Rob Sinclair, Joey Beltran against Brian Rogers, Jared Papazizian's fighting on this card. Alexander Volkov will make his return for Bellator. Then you have Masin Held against Alexander Sarnovsky. That should be a great fight. The winner possibly fighting for a Bellator World Championship. Rafael Carvalho, a very talented fighter. He's taking on Joe Schilling. Of course, he had that great knockout of Melvin Manhoef in his Bellator debut. And then the main event, you got their lightweight champion Will Brooks taking on Dave Jansen. I'm really excited for this card. You know, this one is maybe not getting the hype as I think the last Bellator event with Warren and Galvo, but Brooks and Jansen I think is going to be great. And I mentioned all those other fights either on the main card or the prelims. If you're in Southern California and you have a chance to go to the Brent Event Center in Irvine, California, I don't know how much tickets are, but I would try to get a ticket. I think that's going to be a great night of fights.
Yeah, it's loaded. The undercard's got Sada Wad on it, who's got power in his hands, so that's exciting. Joey Beltran, like you said, yeah, they got a heavyweight fight. It's got pretty much every division. I think Brooks and Jansen is going to be a real good fight. Brooks doesn't seem to care much for Jansen. Said everything he does is average. But we'll see when they lock him in the circle cage this Friday night.
And plus, Dave Jansen wears those sweet red shades after he fights.
Mm-hmm.
And his nickname is the Fugitive. He's a cool guy. I like Dave Jansen. And for Dave Jansen, he was a guy that won a Bellator tournament, had some injury problems, still had to come back and fight a very tough guy. It was the judo guy. Why am I Rich? Why can't I think of Rick Hahn, not Rich. Well, I guess Rick short for Richard. So yeah, he had to fight Rick Hahn and then gets his title shot. So very happy that Dave Jansen's finally kind of getting his due, and obviously Will Brooks, has been nothing but really since losing. Speaking of Awad, since losing to Awad, has been nothing but fantastic in his run in Bellator all the way up to capturing the lightweight title. So very excited for that fight. And if I had to tune in, don't get me wrong, I love the allure of Ben Fodor and the superhero fighting, but if I had to choose one, if I'm sitting at TV, Friday night and I go, am I going to watch Bellator live or am I going to watch World Series of Fighting? I know people are like, well, you can flip the channel and DVR. Yeah, I get that. I'm going to DVR both of them, but I'm just saying, if you got to watch one, you got to watch it now. It's Bellator 136 on Friday night.
Yeah, hey, Marcin Held is on the card, and he's Polish.
That he is. All right, well, let's get, speaking of Poland, we're going to get there in just a second. Just a second. Hold on just a second. Because there's a little fight in Virginia Saturday afternoon for the UFC on Fox Sports 1. You may have missed it if you weren't aware that it was during the afternoon, but ended up being a really nice card, Dave. 6 fights were shown on the main card. Started out in the lightweight division with Dustin Poirier making his UFC lightweight debut against Carlos Diego Fajeda. And they were saying in the broadcast that while he can get down to 145, no problem, he's good for that weight class, the constant kind of worry about trying to make 145 pounds, at least to Dustin Poirier in his camp, maybe didn't allow him to give his full attention to training because he was so worried about getting to 145 and not having to drop those extra 10 pounds they feel, and he feels, has got him more focused on a fight camp. Now, this is only one time. We'll see how his future goes, but Diego Fajeda is a solid competitor here at 145, or 155 rather. Has some skills, but I think Dustin Poirier, despite the move up, and I think he showed maybe he's not quite as strong as he is at 145, but I think he showed a lot more fluidity in this weight class, and I think a speed advantage was definitely there in this fight, and with that less weight and less dehydrating yourself, maybe a little more power. I mean, he's never been a guy that's knocked out too many people in the first round. He was able to knock out Fajeda here in the first round, and Dave, it really was not like big bombs that he was throwing. They were very precise and very straight punches, and I think that's, to me, what I took away from the fact that he was able to knock out a guy with more technique more so than power. And if he can do that to a guy who, again, an up-and-coming guy, maybe not the best guy at 155, but a solid competitor nonetheless, I think Dustin Poirier can have a future here at 155.
Yeah, like you said, Jim, he was very didn't have everything behind every punch, but it seemed like he was very methodical, very workmanlike approach. Everything about Poirier looked really good in this fight. looked, cardio looked to be there, power looked to be there. He didn't. Nothing seems stressed about him at all in this fight. It looks like 155 is a lot more natural than 45, and looks like he's going to fight on the Nolans card in June, which I'll be there. So I think I want to say he got Yancy Medeiros, but that's probably wrong.
That sounds right, but yes, he's from Louisiana, so it makes sense, and obviously didn't take any damage in that fight. Why not have him fight in his home? Well, you're not from New Orleans, but I mean from the home state, so pretty much the hometown guy, and will probably end up being on the main card for that one, I would imagine.
Yeah, I'm efforting his next opponent. It doesn't have it on the UFC's website. Shocker.
All right. Well.
Anyway,
we'll get back to that if we have time, but let's move on to the next fight, which was at 145 pounds as Clay Guida took on Robbie Peralta. And this fight kind of went as I thought, Dave, with Clay Guida being able to land some takedowns, land some ground and pound, as he was 6 of 11 on takedowns. But I will say, in Robbie Peralta's defense, he did a lot better defending the takedown than I thought he would have. And I think, even though he lost, I think if you're Robbie Peralta, I think you got to hold your head high. This is the best guy you've ever taken on in his career. And, you stopped 5 takedowns out of 6. And really, besides the first round, Dave, he really wasn't on top of you that long. He was controlling the pace of the fight with the clinch and everything. But I think if you can kind of take what you learned in that fight, build some confidence, like I said, hold your head out high, that you did a pretty good job stopping this guy, which most guys have a lot of problems stopping. You can apply that to your next fight to know, all right, well, if I can have pretty good success stopping Clay Guida, I can maybe have more success the more I work on it against some of the other tough wrestlers in this division. And I think that's something he can take forward into his career. And another thing they added, that he's been training with the folks in TriStar there in Montreal, but yet those guys weren't in his corner. So I'm not sure what happened there, why Faris wasn't in his corner, but I don't know if I don't think that's why he lost the fight, but wouldn't you want the coaches you've been just training with the past 3 months to be in your corner? They kind of know what to expect and whatnot. I just thought that was weird, and when he gets his next fight in the UFC, I would consider trying to get the coaches you most recently worked with instead of old coaches or friends or something that just see every once in a while and then go, hey, can you be in my corner?
Yeah.
I just think that was an odd move, and I'm kind of glad they brought that up on the broadcast.
Yeah, me too. That would kind of like be if we went out and we just cornered Brian in New Orleans in June. If we were like, hey, I know you've been training with random, these other coaches, but let us start yelling, punch him, Brian, punch him, hit him again.
Whizzer.
Hit him, sir. Okay, block that.
Brian, you're going to have to get up. Get up. I mean, that's all it is, right? I'm pretty sure.
Yeah. That's what it seems like. And
Anyways,
I'll be the guy.
Continue.
Stopwatch. That's me. 2 minutes. 2 minutes. Anyway.
Just how random F words like Matt Serra does.
Yeah. Punch him in the fucking chest. Anyway. No, I thought Guida said in the post-fight that he knows that wasn't the most exciting fight. It wasn't, but he won. He beat a dangerous guy in Peralta, and I don't think Guida has a title run left in him, but I think that he's a heck of a measuring stick for whatever division he decides to fight in, and like you said, it's a loss for Peralta, but you can definitely take away stuff from that fight. No, I don't think anybody. That fight was at 45, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't think there's a lot of people at 45 that have that good of a pedigree of wrestling that Guida has. There may be others that have that kind of a wrestling pedigree, but they have other weapons too that you have to be on the lookout for, like Chad Mendez, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But yeah, if you're Peralta, yeah, it's a loss. You didn't get knocked out, you didn't get submitted, you were able to make it the full 15 minutes, and there's a lot to take away from, good things to take away from if you're Robbie Peralta.
All right, the next fight was in the women's bantamweight division as Juliana Pena made her long-awaited return to the UFC after injury to take on Milana Duvea. And this is the Juliana Pena you remember from the show, Dave. A big, strong, 135-pound woman that if she's able to get on top of you, that's it. And that's pretty much kind of how this fight went. Actually, it was Duvea that threw the initial kind of hip toss takedown, and I don't know if that was the best option, as Pena was able to reverse position, eventually get him out. And how do you like outstriking your opponent 65-10 en route to a first round stoppage at the 3:59 marker? And this was just an excellent performance by Juliana Pena. Maybe I would like to see her go a little longer, just to see, how her conditioning was, after such a long layoff. But in terms of, comebacks and, there were a couple questions, there were a couple of situations, on that toss you thought, oh, is her knee going to hold up? It looked like it did. She didn't show any problems of slowing down or moving or anything. So I think by all accounts, that's just about as a successful injury return as probably anyone could hope for.
Yeah, she was very impressive in the fight. Looked good. Didn't seem to have a whole lot of problems. Can we slow the Juliana Pena hype trade down just a little bit? The opponent that she fought, much like Betch Correia, she hasn't really beat anybody like with a big name. Didn't she beat Rakosi in the final, the finale?
Yes, and obviously, as we know, Rakosi is a natural strawweight fighter, and that's what she will be fighting at come UFC 186. So, yeah, now that win doesn't hold as much weight, now that the division is officially in the UFC, and granted, like you said, this may not be the highest level of competition, but I think post-injury coming back, a good sign to see. And, yeah, I don't think her next fight should be a number one contender fight, but it definitely should be someone a little higher up in the prestige.
Yeah, I just thought that all the Twitter and Facebook and, all over the place, the love for her. I mean, she did great in her fight, but slow the hype train down just a little bit. Might have another Mike Swick on her hand. Might be another 2 years.
The next fight, hope not. The next fight of the evening, at 155 pounds, as one of Juliana Pena's training partners, Michael Chiesa, and another former Ultimate Fighter winner, took on the Canadian Mitch Clark. And in this fight, Dave, we thought it would be a grappling-based fight, but while Chiesa, I think, definitely did have the grappling advantage, he was 4-7 on his takedowns, 0-for-4 on Mitch Clark. I think I saw a little bit of an improvement in the stand-up game and maybe more effort to keep things standing with Michael Chiesa. As looking over at the striking numbers, he outstruck Mitch Clark 98-81, and really, obviously, the first round there he had the takedowns, but outstruck him pretty bad in the first two rounds. The third round was pretty even. Both guys pretty much just standing, both 0-for-1 on takedowns. That one round, I felt you kind of maybe could have tossed that one in the air. Actually, Mitch Clark was the one who landed more strikes, 48-29. Probably ended up would have given Clark that round, but I think Chiesa kind of had the first two in the bag there, and Clark would have had to do something really crazy, to either get a 10-8 or obviously get a finish to win. But I thought this was a good performance by Michael Chiesa, and I think for Mitch Clark, I'm not saying he has to drop down to 145, but that was one thing I noticed in this fight is he definitely was not as strong physically as Michael Chiesa, and something, if he wants to make a run in the championship level, at least something he should look at. If it's something he can't physically do, you can't physically do it, but that is one thing I kind of noticed in the fight is he just had a lot of trouble dealing with the size of the man known as the Maverick.
Yeah, I thought this was a good fight for Chiesa. Didn't really think about Clark going down, but now that you mention it, might not be a half bad idea. Um, Chiesa seems to improve every time. He's a very slick grappler, and I don't know where do they train him and Pena?
It's him, Pena, and Sam Cecilia. They're the three, and it's I believe in Tacoma, Washington.
Yeah, I mean they don't have they don't have real big names, but it's a solid group of people that they have up there, and say what you want, it might not be Jackson Winklejohns or whatever, but every time we see Chiesa in there, he seems to get better and better. So they're doing something right in Washington.
And yeah, definitely looking forward, to his next fight. It should be a good one. All right, well, let's get to a man that lost to Michael Chiesa in that season of the Ultimate Fighters finale. That's the Raging Al Iaquinta, as he took on former Strikeforce fighter Jorge Masvidal. And I thought this was a pretty fun fight, Dave. When it came down to it, though, Al Iaquinta was 0 for 9 on his takedowns, and he got outstruck by Masvidal 86-55. Yet, despite all that, he walked away with a split decision victory with two judges scoring it 29-28 in his favor, and then a 30-27, which actually I believe that was technically for Masvidal, but that was the one judge there. While it was a close fight, Dave, I think Iaquinta was winning the first round up until kind of that last minute and a half where Masvidal was all over him after landing a lot of power punches. And I think that closeness to finishing the fight gave Masvidal the first round. Like I said, the second two were close, but honestly, I would agree with that one judge, as weird as that sounds. Probably would have gave both to Masvidal. The second round, I think you could make a case for Iaquinta. Looking at the striking numbers, it was just 20-17 in favor of Masvidal in striking. I think that was the closest round, but a little surprised that it came down to a split decision, and obviously those two judges that scored it for Iaquinta, I'm assuming they gave him both rounds 2 and 3. I find it hard to believe of those rounds they gave him round 1, but it was a close fight. I understand the fans booing. I think Iaquinta took it a little too much to heart. I think they were more booing the decision more so than him, but when you're talking to a crowd of a couple thousand people there, and he's like, "You're booing me," you're not going to get a straight answer. I'm not really sure what he was expecting in that instance, and got a little heated. I'm sure the UFC will sit him aside and be like, you can be upset, but you can't say those words, and we're gonna have to find you this time or something. Because they said Dana White did an interview, and he said the only thing I don't want my guys to say in an interview is the F word on TV. And Iaquinta broke that rule, so I would imagine he's going to face some type of fine there. I mean, it was a good performance, Dave, but I thought Masvidal was better on Saturday night, and he got the lucky judges thing. When it goes there, you don't sure what's going to happen, and that's what happened.
Stop me if you've heard this one. Don't leave it in the hands of the judges.
No, I mean that's pretty much the story of this fight.
I mean, if you think about a judge's job, like I've been trying to rationalize. So Iaquinta wins round 1 essentially, except for like the last minute and a half. But I understand that you probably give the round to Masvidal, but if they're looking at it, you figure it's 5 minutes. That's 300 seconds. So for 210 seconds, he was winning the round, but for 90, he got beat up. So it's like, if you break it down like that, more of the round he was dominant, so he should win the round.
Right, but then you look at in his 3.5 minutes of dominance, how close was he to winning the fight as opposed to Masvidal's 90 seconds?
I mean, I agree. I'm just saying that, like, it's what they're supposed to do, and I've talked to judges before, is they're supposed to watch the entire round. Once the bell rings to end the round, that is when they write their score down. And maybe it was a fact that the judges were kind of coasting and never really changed it. We don't know. And
well, regardless how you score the first round, however, the second two rounds were obviously close, but and again, obviously the judges again don't get the stats, and people say, well, the stats could mislead them and stuff like that. If you look at the stats and say a guy got outstruck by 30 strikes and was 0 for 9 on takedowns, you do not expect that guy to win.
I agree.
That's what I'm talking about. Like, it doesn't, I don't care whether you're supposed to see stats or not, but when you look at discrepancies like that, and I know it's a cosmetic thing, but you look at one guy's completely bloody and the other guy's fine. I don't know. Stuff happens. It goes to the judges. I'm not trying to make it out like it was a completely one-sided fight and Masvidal should have been scored, 3 10-8 rounds or anything like that. This is what happens in close fights. Sometimes it doesn't go your way, but I felt on Saturday night that Mr. Gamebreed there probably should have got the W.
Oh yeah. What'll be interesting is to see what the UFC does with both of these guys. Because Iaquinta wins, do they give him another step up, or do they keep somebody kind of at Masvidal's level to where kind of prove himself again? It'll be interesting to see who they give both of these guys their next fight.
All right, let's get to the main event of the evening at 145 pounds as two former featherweight title contenders battle each other as Chad Mendes took on Ricardo Lamas. And while I thought this had a chance to be a fun and exciting fight, I did not think it would end in the first round. I can tell you that much. But I'm not surprised that if there was a finish, it was at the hands of Money Mendes there. As we kind of mentioned in our preview, Dave, yes, Lamas is a tough guy, but Mendes has that finishing ability, and that could be the edge in this fight, his power. How will Lamas deal with his power? And the answer was not very well. He did not deal with his power very well, as I believe it started out with a straight right is the punch that started the beginning of the end for the bully Lamas, and then you throw in a knee, a left hook, and I believe a big right uppercut that was several more big shots. Eventually Mendes got bat mount, and you see him kind of throw the uppercut underneath the body and the arms to Lamas there. And with that kind of head action there off that blow, referee Dan Murgulata had to step in and stop this one, the 245 marker, if I can speak. And Mendes has had some great performances in the octagon, Dave, but considering how this one went down against who it was in the main event, this might be his best performance in the octagon he's ever had. This was a tremendous performance.
Yeah. Just to go back for a second, one of Mendes' best performances was his knockout of Guida. I was very impressed because you don't see that happen very much. And you also, Chad Mendes is a tricky fella because his wrestling is on point. He's super strong, and he's got knockout power. So you have to be perfect in your fight. And unfortunately, Ricardo Lamas got caught. And, you talk about what, like that unwritten rule that you can't have 3 title shots. You've already lost to the champ twice. I want to see Mendes Aldo again.
I mean, it could happen. What's next for Chad Mendes is very uncertain because his training partner and friend and mentor and coach, Uriah Faber, is taking on Frankie Edgar here coming up in about a month. If Frankie Edgar wins, I firmly believe Frankie Edgar will fight the winner of Jose Aldo and Conor McGregor. So, with that said, that doesn't leave Mendes a lot of options. The only option I can really think of, Dave, is next weekend in New Jersey, there's a pretty big fight at featherweight between Max Holloway and Cub Swanson. And I'm thinking the winner of that fights Chad Mendes here in a few months. That's kind of my thinking. Other than that, he's beaten most of the top guys, or some of the top guys are on losses, so I'm not sure how big a deal that is. The only fight I could maybe see is, let's say Jose Aldo wins his fight against McGregor, and we get Aldo Edgar too, and that leaves Conor McGregor out. I think that would probably be the only guy he would take off a loss, would be McGregor Mendez. But
Yeah.
again, we gotta wait a while till that happens. So if he wants to fight sooner rather than later, we can easily book the winner of Holloway and Swanson against him really after next weekend. In terms of having that fight, just waiting for a date and waiting for the winner of that fight to recover.
Yeah, it's a good point. I wonder, Mendez. Mendez is a guy that he didn't take much damage in that fight, and if he's smart, and especially if in that fight you were just talking about, whoever comes out winning that fight, if they can get a fight scheduled for July, maybe get on that card, the one out in Vegas, the McGregor-Aldo, if somebody were to get hurt, it's a perfect opportunity to slide in there, especially if you're not hurt, might as well book yourself. That way, at least you're on the same time frame as Aldo or McGregor, whoever wins. The one wrench in there is, if McGregor wins, that Aldo's going to get a rematch. It's got to.
Possibly, and like I said, with that Frankie Edgar looming around, if he wins, he very, very much has a claim to getting another shot at that title.
Yeah.
All right, well, let's get to this weekend's action on the Fight Pass for the UFC Fight Night Krakow, Poland, here on April 11th. 4 fights will be shown on the main part of the Fight Pass card, but of course, every single fight will be available there on the Fight Pass to view during and after the event goes through its live portion. And starting with the first fight of the night, very excited for this one, Dave, women's strawweight division. We have Joanne Calderwood, as she will make her non-tough UFC debut here, and she will be taking on a newcomer here for the UFC, and one that I think is going to be a pretty good fight here. As I'm bringing up the stats on Miss Moroz, Maranya Moroz, and she is actually from the Ukraine, 5-0 in her career, and 4 of her 5 career victories are by submission. And one thing most people talk about when they talk about Joanne Calderwood is her height, the fact she's so tall for the strawweight division. And she's listed at 5'6", but believe it or not, Miss Moroz, nicknamed the Iron Lady, she is 5'7". So that advantage that Calderwood normally has is pretty much negated in this fight. Now, that's just in terms of height and reach. Now, as far as stand-up and striking prowess, I would still give the woman from Scotland the advantage, but it will be interesting to see her taking on someone that's actually kind of the same height as her, for once. And 2, we saw on the show that if you kind of pressure Joanne Calderwood and you kind of take her out of her rhythm, you can possibly catch her off guard and get her into submission. That's what Rose Namajunas was able to do on the show. And with that submission pedigree there of Moroz, I wonder if that's her strategy. And if that's what she's going to try to do is just get up in Calderwood's face, try to get this thing to ground, and battle her that way. Because we've seen on many occasions, Dave, not just in the Tough Show, but also in her Victa days, if you sit and let Calderwood get into a rhythm and strike with you, you lose. I mean, it's plain and simple. She's really able to handle striking very well, rhythm and range, and catch you, with that jab and leg kicks. And if you want to do that, you're probably going to lose. And so for Moroz, it'll be interesting to see what strategy she implores here against the undefeated woman from Scotland.
Yeah, Joanne is a tough fight for somebody like Marina, whatever it is, on her way into the UFC. I wouldn't be surprised if Joanne gets a top 3 girl after this fight, if she's the number 6 strawweight in the world, and she's got to fight somebody that's not ranked, new to the UFC. You would think that all these girls would be, dying to get a fight so that they can get towards that title shot. I can't believe that they can't find somebody ranked for her to fight.
Well, it kind of goes back on the Ultimate Fighter. She was the one cast member that didn't fight another cast member. They had to bring in So Hee Ham from Korea for her to fight at the Ultimate Fighter 20 finale.
Yeah, that's right.
And you add in the fact that this fight is in Poland, maybe, a lot of those other girls didn't want to fly to Poland. And obviously with Moroz being in the Ukraine, which I believe either shares a border or is, let's put it this way, a lot closer than, say, someone flying from Florida. I'll put it that way. The Ukraine's a lot closer. I'm sure you could just take a train from where she's at in the Ukraine to get to Poland. So I'm sure that could be another reason why. And also, let's factor in this, as weird as it may sound. The UFC, I think, is hoping Calderwood can win this fight quick and fight on that card in Scotland this summer.
Yeah, I mean,
if she doesn't get beat up and she's able to go, she says she's wanted to fight on that card, obviously the first ever UFC fight in Scotland. So I got to believe that she's going to do whatever she can to get on that card. And having a quick performance against Moroz probably guarantees her fighting somebody in Scotland.
Yeah, I think that's a perfect assumption. It's no coincidence that Dana says if they get to New York that they're going to fight in December, which would give Jones and Weidman plenty of time to be recuperated from their springtime fights to fight on the supercard in New York. So
right, with both them being New York natives.
Yeah, so the same deal with Joanne. If she can get this done, she'll be on that Scotland card. Hopefully, she'll get a name to where they can kind of push her to that next level. Because I think she's talented enough to fight for that belt.
Absolutely. All right, well, let's get to the next fight of the evening in the welterweight division, and that will be between Paweł Polak, as he takes on former Tough Nations runner-up Sheldon Westcott. Looking at Polak, 0-1 in the UFC. His last fight was a loss to Peter Sabata in his only UFC fight at UFC Fight Night Berlin, and 6 of his 10 career victories are by knockout. He also has 3 submission victories to his credit, so he only has 1 decision victory in his career. Looking at Sheldon Westcott, as I mentioned, lost his only fight in the UFC as well. That was the Tough Nations finale against Elias Theodorou, and 6 of his 8 career victories are by finish with 3 knockouts and 3 submissions. Now, we got to talk to Sheldon Westcott post Tough Nations. Very nice guy. Really knows the sport. When you talk about people being a student of the game, very much Sheldon Westcott is that. He's probably, I wouldn't say the only one, but he's one of the few UFC fighters, Dave, that we have talked to that, regardless of whether it would be a potential opponent to him down the road, he watches almost every UFC fight and knows probably just about as much of the UFC as you and I do. So he's very much a student of the game, and he had a little bit of an injury. Obviously, Tough Nations was last April, so it's been a while since he's fought. He's had some injury problems, but I feel he'll be fully prepared for this fight. And they didn't give him an easy one. People might not know Polak, but he's from Poland, fighting in his home country. He's had to travel all this way from Edmonton, Alberta, Canada, to have this fight. This is not going to be an easy task for Sheldon Westcott, but I think this is going to be a fun stand-up fight, and I would be surprised with these two guys' finishing ability that we see 15 minutes at the end of this one.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if Sheldon Westcott has a full game plan set out for this guy that he's fighting. But like you said he watches everything. He just likes to soak it all in, learn everything possible that he can about anybody that he could be fighting. So he takes special interest in 170, 185, 155, anybody right around that area. I don't know a whole lot about his opponent, but Sheldon probably wants to make a name for himself, being that he's had such a long layoff. And we'll see on Fight Pass come Saturday.
The co-main event of the evening is in the light heavyweight division, as Jan Blachowicz will take on Jimmy Manuwa. Looking at the man from Poland and Blachowicz, he is 1-0 in the UFC. His last fight, he defeated Ir Latifi at the Fight Night in Sweden, and 7 of his 18 career victories are by submission, overall riding a 6-fight winning streak. Looking at Manuel, 3-1 in the UFC. His only loss was his last fight, as he lost to Alexander Gustafsson at the card he headlined with Gustafsson back in London last year in March. And 13 of his 14 career victories are by knockout. Now, the last time Mr. Blachowicz fought, he kind of pulled the upset. Latifi was the heavy favorite in that fight in Sweden, and Blachowicz was able to knock him out. Now, Jimmy Manuwa, I would say, is a little bit of a step up in competition, but with the layoff and the way that loss was for Manuwa, pretty devastating, losing in his hometown like that, how will Manuwa bounce back? He's never really had to deal with that before in his career. And obviously now he's, the guy facing the hometown guy, fighting Blachowicz in Poland. And, how will that help or hurt Jan? Very interesting, but once again, a fight, Dave, I don't think is going to go 15 minutes, and I think one of these two gentlemen are going to get knocked out. I think we're going to see a slugfest here in Krakow.
Yeah, a slugfest would go a long way to help both of these guys. Maybe is the right way to say it. I don't remember I don't remember his last fight. Which is probably awful. It should, if it was more eventful, maybe I remember. But Manuwa obviously wants to get back on the winning track, and one of these guys getting a knockout definitely puts them on the radar. And especially if Jan can come in and beat, or Jan, sorry, if he can come in and beat Manuwa, that definitely it's not going to be easy, but it's definitely doable, and it definitely catapults you. Think about the MMA math. Manuwa just lost to Gustafsson, and Gustafsson's arguably top 3, top 4 in the light heavyweight division. If Jan can go out there and beat that guy, then that goes a long way for your career and your rankings for your next fight. And you know what? I want to make another point.
Mm-hmm.
Some of these guys, Jim, like Manuwa. So let's say he's fighting April the 10th, right? So let's say he wins this fight. He's out for 30 days, no compete. These fights are a big deal for somebody like a Manuwa. If you're not top 15 come July, you're not getting paid that extra money from the Reebok deal. So if you go out and have a bad fight, you're taking money out of your pocket come July because you don't have another chance to move up or move down in the rankings. So Joanne is number 6, and just had a brain fart. And Manuwa's 9. Granted, you're fighting unranked guys and girls, but you need to win these or you're going to lose money. So these aren't just, these fights have much bigger implications.
Right, and for Manuwa, when you've been out 13 months, that means you've been out a paycheck for 13 months.
Right.
He can't, not even just looking at a Reebok deal, he needs to fight just because he hasn't been fighting. And I'm sure wants to. So you got to factor that in as well.
Yep. Speaking of rankings, Jim, how about in the main event, Gabriel Gonzaga against Mirko Krokop? How about the fact that the heavyweight division, Gabriel Gonzaga is ranked 14? How about that?
Ugh. All right, well, let's let's get to this main event. As you mentioned, Gabriel Gonzaga against Mirko Krokop for the second time. Looking at Mirko Krokop, this is his first fight in the UFC since 2011, and that was a third-round knockout loss to Roy Nelson at UFC 137. Overall, in the UFC, his career record is 4-6. He has not won in the UFC, Dave, since 2010, where he submitted Pat Barry at UFC 115. He has since done some Glory Kickboxing. He has fought in a couple other organizations kind of sparingly over the last couple of years. But I think the UFC re-signing him was, as far as we know, Dave, I think maybe just for this fight against Gabriel Gonzaga and what he calls trying to avenge the worst loss of his career, which for those of you who don't know, Cro Cop fought Gonzaga as the main event for UFC 170. The winner was supposed to get a title shot at then champion Randy Couture. Cro Cop, obviously coming off a tremendous run in Pride, had a very dominating performance over Eddie Sanchez, and Gonzaga kind of had a surprising, nice little win streak, but most people were thinking Gonzaga did not stand a chance against Mirko Cro Cop, and then the head kick out of nowhere, Dave, one of the best knockouts you'll probably see in the UFC, knocked out Mirko Cro Cop right towards the end of the first round, and that completely changed two men's career. You get Gonzaga goes on to get a title shot, and Cro Cop for more or less, Dave, kind of toils in mediocrity for the rest of his career. It's interesting to think what would have happened had Cro Cop won that fight instead of Gonzaga, but this is kind of redemption here for Cro Cop. Like I said, I think this is his last fight in MMA. I think if he can beat Gonzaga, I think he'll go on top. I mean, it's not quite his home country of Croatia, but pretty darn close, and probably about the closest the UFC will come to Croatia. Maybe not ever, but in recent memory, they'll probably be about the closest they'll be. So he took this fight, and I honestly think he's going to win. I'm giving away my pick here, but Gonzaga has looked awful in his last few fights. He got knocked out by Mitrione in the first round in his last fight at Fox 13. He's 11-8 in his career. I believe he's on currently a 2-fight losing streak. I just don't see a lot left in the tank for Gonzaga. Now, that's not me saying that means Cro Cop has a tremendous lot in the tank, but I just think with Cro Cop's finishing ability and his ability to keep things standing, I just find it hard to believe he gets caught a second time by something like that from Gonzaga.
Yeah, let me reiterate that Gabriel Gonzaga is ranked 14. I don't know if I mentioned that before.
You did.
Yeah. The Gonzaga Cro Copping of Cro Cop was exciting when it happened. These two shouldn't be fighting each other. These two. This is all about how close Cro Cop is to home. Like you said, redemption. That's really about all this is. There's really, it's two big guys. Hopefully it's entertaining. But what I think will be funny is the lead up to the fight on Fight Pass. Like, these guys are going to get winded when they walk from the van to the locker room. Like, they're going to have to stop while the camera's on them. But I do have breaking news. This just in from Steve Sadler. He says his thoughts on Cro Cop versus Gonzaga. Cro Cop was done almost a decade ago. Can't imagine him ever winning another fight in the UFC. He should be fighting Kimbo Slice and Ken Shamrock in Bellator. I'd be more interested in that angle.
Well, fighting Cro Cop's pretty close to fighting one of those two guys. Or right. Fighting Gonzaga, rather. I mean, yeah. Let's be honest here. Gonzaga is not at the top of his game anymore either. It's not like Cro Cop's fighting Junior Dos Santos.
Right.
Which he had fought Dos Santos, but I mean, it's not like he's fighting Dos Santos now. He's not fighting Travis Brown. You know what I mean? He's not fighting Alistar Overeem, Fabricio Verdum. Yep. He's fighting Gabriel Gonzaga. And to be honest, I think this is a solid main event for the UFC's first trip to Poland. I really do.
It's got the name recognition.
I mean, it's a fight. If you look at these 4 fights here that are on this main card, that's not like a pay-per-view card or anything. But I think for, with 2 of those fighters that we mentioned from Poland, you have the other one from Scotland, you have one from Ukraine, Cro Cop's from Croatia, Manawa's from England. You got a very heavily European represented card, and I think this is a solid card to have in Poland, to be quite honest. And this is going to test the waters. I mean, if the Polish fans come out to this, what most people consider, maybe a below-average UFC card, imagine what the turnout would be if they actually put on halfway decent fights. You know what I mean? Like, because you got to believe Joanna Jędrzejczyk is going to have a title defense in her home country if she continues to be champion. That's going to happen, right? And obviously, if the UFC is going to put a title fight in Poland, if they can come out for this, they're going to come out for that. That's kind of what my rationale for this is what I'm saying.
Yeah. No, isn't it weird that at the beginning of the episode we talked about them perhaps canceling an event, and they're giving refunds because Rampage isn't on the card, but this one they expect the Polish fans to pay full price?
Well, who knows how much the tickets cost for this, though?
Do they use dollars in Poland?
Polish dollars.
What's a dollar here to a dollar?
Probably not. Probably a lot. I don't think, unless Poland uses the euro. I don't know. I am not up on my Polish in European economics.
Come on, Jim, school us.
I can't say that for 100% certainty, but they could be using the euro, and if they use the euro, obviously that's weighted higher because of all the countries using it. So, yeah, maybe Google that real quick here while I transition, Dave, to get to picks. UFC Fight Night Krakow, Poland. UFC Fight Pass, April 11th, 2015. The first fight of the evening in the women's strawweight division, as Maureen Moroz takes on Joanne Calderwood. Got to go with JoJo. Loved her on the show. Think she definitely has a bright future here in this division. Yeah, gonna go with JoJo.
I'm gonna go with JoJo as well.
All right, in welterweight, Sheldon Westcott against Mr. Polak. No, he's the home country guy here, Mr. Polak, but I think Sheldon Westcott has a little more tools here against Mr. Powell Polak, so give me the Canadian in this one.
Yeah, Westcott as well.
Jan Blachowicz against Jimmy Manuwa in the light heavyweight division for the co-main event. I think Blachowicz once again has a chance to maybe shock the world as a little much in his win against Latifi, but it was an upset, and I think he has a chance to pull the upset in his home country. But with the exception of Gustafsson, everyone else Manuwa has taken on, he is absolutely decimated. So even with the kind of little layoff there, I'm going to go with the man known as the poster boy, Jimmy Manuwa.
I'm going to take Manuwa as well.
All right, I already kind of gave away my pick here for the main event in the heavyweight division, Mirko Krokop against Gabriel Gonzaga, but I think this is it. This is Krokop. We get to see him one last time, and he's going to hang him up for good, and I think he's going to do it in devastating fashion. Maybe even that signature left head kick that he, that sends people to the cemetery, and that also may send the end of Gabriel Gonzaga's career as well. So give me the man from Croatia, Mr. Mirko Krokop.
Jim, I'm going to bet $100 US, which would translate to 370-ish Polish zlotys.
There you go.
On Mirko Krokop.
There you go. All right. Well, that's it here for
Beyond the Cage,
Beyond
throwing
the Cage.
knowledge.
Any other final thoughts here, Dave?
No, I hope I pronounced that right, Jim.
I mean, would anyone blame you if you didn't pronounce it right?
Yeah, I don't think anybody would know.
But so it's roughly, that's like you said, $100 US was 370. About.
Yeah. So it's 1 to on the
1
currency.
to 3.7.
Yeah. I don't know if that's it would be $3.70, but I don't know how that's, I don't get it.
Well, that's what it is. It's almost like a 4-to-1 clip, really.
Yeah, fair enough.
I mean, if you really had to round up, so that means so that's like one of their dollars, if you use it here, is almost worth like a quarter.
Correct.
Almost. All right, well then, yeah.
You know what we forgot to mention? We are 6 likes away from starting our next contest.
Yes, definitely wanted to mention that. If you don't know what we're talking about, if you haven't liked our Facebook page already,
what are you doing?
Facebook.com/Beyond the Cage Podcast. Yes, what are you doing? And if you see on there, you'll see I had a post, and I'll probably repost it again. We're trying to get to 350 likes. Currently, we're at 344. So we're 6 likes away from 350, and if we get that, we will start a contest to give away, and I have it pictured there. I have another signed 8x10 photo from UFC fighter Paige Van Zandt, who will be fighting next weekend in New Jersey. I have some other prizes I will give away as well. I'm still working out the different prize packs, but we'll probably give away 3 different prize packs once again. And a lot of people like that Q&A we did last month for the prizes last month, so I think we're gonna stick with that. We'll stick with the fan Q&A, but we need 6 more likes first. So if you haven't already, go to facebook.com/BeyondTheCagePodcast and like our page, and please tell your friends, because once you like the page, that's one of your ways you can enter the contest and win a signed photo from Paige Van Zandt. All right. Anything else, Dave?
Nice. Well, sir, that'll do it for me.
All right. He is the Juice, Dave Sadler. You can follow him on Twitter @VigilanteJuice, and I'm your host, Jim Graham. You can follow me on Twitter @JimGraham. And once again, thank you for listening to another presentation of the Beyond the Cage podcast.